time, a football Friday. You've been waiting a long time now. You need it, you want it, and you're ready to put this bye week behind you and get to some Michigan football, which is tomorrow. Welcome in. Maize and Blue Reviews, good afternoon, Michigan football. Yeah, I remember thinking over the years that at times it felt silly. Actually, for a lot of years, it felt really silly putting yourself in position where you would say, what if the Lions ever made the Super Bowl? You know, it sounded stupid for a lot of years, except just actually these past couple of years. And I don't like annually the extra week after the championship games that you have to wait for the Super Bowl. It's just a lot of ridiculous stuff. And then I'm just kind of like, let's go. But I said, if the Lions ever made it, well, that'd be awesome. You know, you'd relish in the anticipation, I guess, and the build up of the game. It'd be awesome. And it feels a little bit like that. It's not a Super Bowl tomorrow in Chicago. Michigan's already had a bye week, and you got to go through it. You get it, but then you get another one. And this is somewhat of a recent phenomenon where they build in an extra bye week, and you have to sit here and it has done the trick. I'm ready. One thing about college is, you have games, you still have games. The bad thing about the Super Bowl, you have all the football, it culminates in the AFC, NFC championship games, and then the next Sunday you're sitting there and you're like, whoa. This isn't. What's this? This is nothing. This is not what you wanted. College is done, at least college. And last Saturday, the games were pretty awesome. Penn State in Indiana and Iowa and Oregon, the games that I watched, those were very entertaining, and I liked it. So, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I love that they're getting back out there. I love the venue, and I like the time here. So everything is to me, when I look at it, the excitement is verified that tomorrow, the anticipation, I guess, verified. I'm ready for it. To get ready, around here, I live in just northwest of Ann Arbor, out here in Dexter Township. And out here, when you move somewhere, whatever the locals are into, you end up getting into it, parades or whatever else. But out here, I've already got the text today that, come on by to the barn. It is, opening day eve, and everybody's in high spirits, and they are out here. And I did something. It was true. I've seen a lot of big racks, deer racks this week, just driving around or just looking out the backyard. I know people, when they see in the city where I lived, 99% of my life, they, they'll take a picture when they see a deer, and they're like, "Woo! We got a deer." That's happening, 10 times a day. They're just everywhere out here. But when you see the racks, that's you see a deer, you've seen one, you've seen them all. But once you start seeing the racks, like, oh, that is an impressive rack. And then I think it was last Sunday, it snowed, and I was looking out the back window, and I saw some deer. And again, it's not a uncommon occurrence. But I looked a little closer. I'm like, ooh, that's a big rack. And then right next to it was an even bigger rack. I was like, all right. I had thought for years I would see a lot of deer, but I never seen racks. And now I'm starting to see them. And one other rack story, and I don't know if it's in my mind and in my imagination. Driving into town a year or two ago, right at the edge of the road, I could see, and it was dusk, and I could see it like it was a dream, and I could still recall seeing it. It was a deer where you would look in the movies or something. The biggest rack that I've ever seen. I don't even know how many points and everything, but this had to be, there couldn't even be a bigger rack. I mean, it's just this monster rack, and it's right by the end of it. So I stop, and I was just kind of drive by, and I'm like, wow. And I thought it was fake, because it was so big and it was right at the edge of the road, and the house right where this road bends, they've got a lot of I say junk out in the yard. And as I was driving by, I said, it's not very. I don't know if it's illegal, but it's not very nice to put this like fake gigantic deer right at the end of the road. 'Cause people are going to be like, "Whoa," And when I was coming back, I looked over there, and the deer was gone. And so I thought one of two things: that these people were just playing a joke for a little bit, decided not so funny anymore. And I've never seen it, although I look, over there. I haven't seen a deer since. Or the one that I want to believe, and maybe it was true, that it was actually a real buck. And it was the greatest one ever living out here in Dexter. And one day, maybe I'll be looking through the local paper, and somebody will say, "Monster deer landed right in Dexter." And I'll say, that's it. So that would be the kind of one where you want to get it put up on the wall if you would get it. No question. So that's it. There's the excitement around here, and a lot of excitement. Now, there's some excitement for Michigan when they saw the news that the NCAA came out and hammered Michigan State, and it happened right at the end of Wednesday's show. I saw someone right at the end say something, I saw that Michigan State was getting their comeuppance from the NCAA and everything else, and that they were going to have to vacate some wins. And then I saw somebody put a comment, "Oh, they're going to have to vacate the Central Michigan game," which is funny. It's the one that Stallions was on the sideline. And I probably, could have stayed on and done another half hour there. I didn't. It was like right at the tail end of the show. So I'm back here, and I've got some thoughts on the Spartans getting hammered by the NCAA. I've got the prediction for tomorrow's game, how I see it, the exact numbers, and how I see it playing out. But let's get right to the game tomorrow. Michigan, they'll be in a baseball stadium in Wrigley, and they will be wearing white tops with the blue pants. Those are the road uniforms. People get really excited about Michigan's uniforms. I get that. I could tell you I like all of the uniforms, so it never really matters to me. This one that I have put up on the left here, there's a photo of Jair Hill coming in from center field with, I guess, pigeons flying around like they might be at a baseball game. That's the classic uniform: blue shirts, maize pants, but I like them all, really. I didn't think back in 2011 when they broke out the special night game uniforms when Michigan played Notre Dame all week long. When I saw, I thought, this looks like a third grader drew this with his crayon. I said, well, that's the way they used to look. And I still said, I didn't like them. And then they won the game, and I thought, I kind of like them. And then I looked around the stadium in the ensuing games and around there, and I'm like, everybody's got these jerseys on. I like it, So since then, my approach is where I look at it, even if I don't really like a uniform, this is for any team. If the team that I like wins, I end up liking the uniform. So that's how I roll when it comes down to that. Now, this game tomorrow, I have a few different thoughts on what's happening here. And as always, I like to take your thoughts when it comes down to the game and everything. And SW Lion is talking about Wrigley. It'll be interesting. It is interesting. It would have been interesting if they were playing at that little stadium right next to the water, because every cutaway you'd look out and you'd say, "Oh, ooh, that's nice." And in Wrigley, because of the history, and I'd say it's an oddity. I guess it is oddity now. You see hockey games and baseball stadiums and outdoors. And if you're old enough, I'm not. The Lions used to play at Tiger Stadium, and I would see the pictures, and I was just be like, okay. I did see the Pistons before the Palace was built. They used to play at Cobo, but then they were playing at the Silverdome, and they used to bring out this big curtain, and they would half the stadium, and then there was some, I guess it would have been an ice storm, broke the Silverdome roof, and then they had to go back, and they were playing at a hockey stadium in Joe Louis. But hockey and basketball, you do that all the time now. They change them up. They'll play them in the same day. But football at baseball, it's unique. It's different. It's kind of cool. Wrigley has a charm. For years before the Cubs finally won a World Series, they were so cursed, and it was like the fans. I think they have enjoyed being cursed. Like, oh, we're cursed. We'll never win anything. Let's slam another one. And they didn't even put lights up at Wrigley until 1988. And then when they finally did, it's still the charm is playing in the day. And I'm glad they're doing that. I don't know if that's a little history aside or not, but the charm of Wrigley Field. And like I said earlier this week, it reminds me of how Tiger Stadium used to look before they put the blue and orange reserve seats. And some people are like, what are you talking about? That's 20th century talk. There's no doubt about it. That's 20th century talk. And so, got to go back there a little bit, but it's a cool venue. Now, I like it a lot more, if Michigan wins. If somehow they fall at Wrigley Field, it's not going to be sitting around saying, oh, that was very charming. Oh, that was a lot of fun. No. Probably find something to come, the wind at Wrigley was a joke, or, I don't know, whatever it is, sight lines for the game look ridiculous, whatever. But, if they end up getting the victory, then it'll change. But I did say something after Michigan beat Purdue, and I still feel like this. And I think people understood it and maybe thought it, but now they're not thinking about it so much. And that if I was asked if I could have a guaranteed 2 wins after Purdue, at Northwestern and at Maryland, with the caveat that the passing game was still going to look like the last 2 games, but you'd get the victory, a guaranteed victory. Would you take that? At first, whenever these hypothetical comes up, I almost always grab it and say, yes, I'll take it. Are you kidding me? 2 wins, going in, controlling your own destiny, I think, against Ohio State, I'll take it. But then this particular time, I said, no, I will not take it. I think Michigan has to get it going with their passing game. If you recall, all summer long, when I talked about Michigan, I'd say, there's 3 big question marks with this team: quarterback, wide receiver, or pass catchers, and the offensive line. And as we sit here heading into this game, there is still questions about the pass catchers, the quarterback, and the offensive line in terms of pass blocking. And I think people like how Michigan has been able to run the ball this year, and then with what Jordan Marshall's been able to do. And if I'm thinking about how Sharon Moore and Chip Lindsey are going to attack tomorrow's game, you're going to get a healthy dose. That sounds pretty easy to say, of Jordan Marshall. And even though they say that, oh yeah, we'll get Cusdahl in there a little bit and Jasper, maybe they will. I've seen a lot of times where coaches say that at Michigan, and then they just feed the hot hand in the back, like Marshall. Would it surprise me if Jordan Marshall had 30 carries tomorrow? 30 is a lot. No. No. Now, I've had 50 carries. That would surprise me. So that's crazy. Not that crazy if you look back at Michigan football history, but 30 sounds even crazy, but I could see it. I think it'll be closer to 30 than 20. And they may have wanted to get the passing game going in these last two games, and it just wasn't clicking. So then they're like, it's a close game. To hell with it. We have to abandon that, and we just have to let's just turn around and hand it off. So I hope they have, and even with the passing game, because of what I just said, I think they need to have some early success with the passing game. If Underwood, who I'm going to get to in a moment, is off, high, low, whatever, and Michigan is having success on the ground, and it's a relatively close game, and they get into the second half, are they going to be like, let's force that passing game? We really need to get that going. Probably not. They're going to be thinking about a win is a win, and Sharon's going to get his work coat on and come in on Monday and say, I'm not apologizing for anything that we, can pass the ball again. But these are all hypotheticals. I just talk about what I want to see and what would be best for Michigan. So those are the items. I'm not taking the win, even if presented to me, if the passing game doesn't get going. And they need that over the next two. I get the argument they didn't have it last year, what was their bread and butter from 21 to 23? I understand all of that. I'm talking about the here and the now, and what I would like to see, and what's going to bode well for them. Certainly, if they just find ways to win these next 2 weeks, there's going to be a lot of people, myself included, saying, I didn't think they were going to win last year. And they didn't have a quarterback, and it was on the road. And, Bryce might play his best and whatever. But it's going to separate them from being a pretender for the college football playoffs to a contender if they can get the air game going. Which gets me to Bryce Underwood. Quarterback is always going to be in the spotlight and microscope. Add in the highest ranked quarterback recruit ever, local guy, prized recruit, the money aspect, all of those things. And if you had to ask me about Underwood, and I gave you my opinion about it, here it is. He has not been as much fun to watch as I anticipated. His overall game has not been as good as I would have hoped for heading into the season. Now, you have to put a stop on that. I'm not saying that he's a bust. I'm not saying that, I hope he transfer. I'm not saying any of that. I am saying that he has not been as much fun as I anticipated. You could call me out and say, you understand that he's 18. You understand that you have to be patient. You have to understand that there's going to be some ups and downs. I wrote the book on being patient and, him being 18 and that particular narrative. But for me, it's true. I think some people have a hard time splitting that stuff up. He has not been as good as we anticipated, and certainly hasn't been as much fun watching him. That's okay for you to say as a Michigan fan. He could break out and he could really get something going. He could play like he did against Washington. He could win these next 3 games. And we would go back and say, he had those 2 games that were underwhelming, that people were doubting him a little bit. It's not going to be like, oh, you were, a jerk. You didn't know what you were talking about. No, I know what I'm talking about. You don't have to be all or nothing when it comes down to him. I think a lot of people are like, oh, nope. He'll be fine. He's 18. He'll still be the greatest of all time, which might be true. It's okay to admit that he has struggled, that he has been inaccurate, and that he has not been as much fun. So that's the way I see it when it comes down to it. Having said all of it, again, I think my biggest thing is I'm expecting it to be the Jordan Marshall show early, often, for the majority of the game tomorrow. Woo! All right, let's do it. John, how about the nightclub scene Yeah, not much of a nightclub scene out here in Dexter and everything else. Let's go and get some of this feedback about this game tomorrow. Your Robbie says it's unfortunate we share the conference with MSU, the cheaters, no integrity for the game. Am I doing it right? Oh no, you're if you're acting, if the histrionics are you, Robbie, being a Michigan State fan acting how they did against Michigan, you are spot on. You are exactly right. Robbie likes the white tops with the maize pants, but I feel like anytime we wear that, we lose. That's a tough. There's a lot of people that are like you, Robbie, whatever they see, what they might even have their own. Oh, I'm not going to wear this because I get all that. I see it all the time. I have none of that myself. When I see anything out there, if somebody next to me says something like, oh, they're shutting him out, and then there's a long run, everybody wants to like smack the guy or something else. Yeah, we've got nothing to do with that or the colors. I don't think so. Interesting point here from Lion 26. I just hope they don't overuse Marshall. Let's get some of those other backs in there and see what they can do. Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to overuse him. But you put in Kuzdal and he doesn't hit the line with authority and gets tackled. You put in Jasper Parker for a series and it's a 3-and-out. And you're putting Marshall in there and he's dragging guys and he's just, go with Marshall then. So, yeah, I hope they don't overuse him either. But, give those guys a chance. But it's mostly the history of Michigan football. I've seen him talk about get the other backs their love and let them see what they can do. But then I've seen Chris Perry, go for 50 carries, Mike Hart. I mean, that's a long time ago, I guess, but feed them. They had a pretty good tandem of backs over the last few years, so maybe it wasn't Corum 30 times. It felt like it, though. John making a point. He says, don't you find it odd that the Michigan State stuff was kept quiet until it all happened versus the stuff about Michigan being printed everywhere just to find out no games vacated because they didn't cheat? That's a loaded one there, but let's handle it. Let's get to it. I'll handle that part. Let's skip it over and talk about Michigan State. They're hit with 3 years probation, 14 wins from 3 seasons are vacated. I don't find it odd for a number of reasons. One, you've never seen anything like what happened with Michigan, what happened with, using or paying the players out. And it also, I think there's that aspect of it. And also when it comes to Michigan football, the interest is way up here. And for Michigan State, it's way down here. But really it was the oddity, and Michigan was winning. And it was right during a win streak. Everybody loves the public, not Michigan fans, but everybody else in college football. They love a scandal. That Michigan State, who was winning 4 games, if something, would have leaked out, people would have been like, people thought the Mel Tucker ousting and what he, how he ended up getting himself fired was pretty interesting. But this part, the clarity, John, I think you just have to walk through it a little bit here, because when you say Michigan didn't vacate any games because they didn't use any ineligible players, this part about that they didn't cheat, like, here's the thing for me with Michigan State is that paying the players before 21 was a level 1 violation, What Michigan did, work around the rule. What Stallions did, ignore a bylaw, which he shouldn't have done. But if I'm weighing them out, what Michigan State did was worse. Now, I also think that because of this and how it went on, that Michigan State fans, some of them, if not all of them, acted a fool. And they're, chastising, holier than now, looking down at Michigan, constantly just running their mouth about Michigan, blah, 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 Stallions, blah, burning hell, all of this kind of stuff that they did. This puts a stop to all of that. They have zero ground to stand on. They look like idiots. They are idiots. So as much as you say, and look, I'm not somebody that sits online going back and forth and anything else, but I see it. And you try not to let any of that, get under your skin, but that's the whole thing about, trolling and going back and forth. But Michigan State loses this one. And any Michigan State fan that would open their mouth about anything regarding Michigan and signs and the burgers or anything else, you just, you'd say, all right, we've had enough of you here. So it was a great win for Michigan that way. State was the loudest out of any of the critics for Michigan and what happened. And they were never going to let it stop. It's just constantly anything about Michigan. You could bet your bottom dollar that there was going to be somebody in the comments from Michigan State talking about, cheating and all this. And you would see it and say, oh, it's just a typical Spartan. But now, how is a typical Spartan even going to go in there? You're going to be like, really? That's what you're going to write? So that's the great part. That is the great part about the whole thing. When it comes down to it, for me. Yeah, I don't think the Michigan investigation was a witch hunt. I mean, you're going to make Harbaugh told the NCAA to shove it where it don't shine. So they made the effort to leak. They did do, the NCAA did do some nefarious, hey, you can't say anything, but then they were leaking some things. So there's some points, to that when it came down to it. Death by 1,000 cuts reporting over the months on Michigan versus the one and done report with Michigan State. No, I get that point. That's interesting. Here's Marr. He's in. The New Life says Michigan has to do whatever it looks like is going to get them the win. I know they have to do that. I'm saying what is going to bode well for them, either being a pretender or contender, is winning the game and having some semblance of a passing game. SW, struggling on offense against Purdue was a major concern. I'd like to see more play action, which makes sense to use when your offense runs the ball as well as Michigan does. I can't argue with that. I think that sounds like a pretty good thing to put in. Let's see some more play action. If you're having some success, don't you just need that one beat and then find the receiver? Let's see it. Urabi is talking about Bryce needs to stay in the pocket and take what the defense gives him. Check down, short throws. I think that's another one that's spot on. I think being able to, and I think that might be something that they were able to work on. You're not going to make him over the 2 weeks from last game to tomorrow a completely different quarterback and all of this, but can they emphasize to him and work on staying in the pocket and giving what the defense gives him? I say, yeah. Do. There we go. Yeah, look, if you're, I think whatever it comes down to, this comes back to Stallions, is the majority of this stuff I push away from all of it. I've given my opinion over and over again. So, hammering it about how I think it all went down and what I think of Stallions and everything else. I think the majority of this is for rivalry stuff. It is just out there, and that's how it's played out. And so, if you're a Michigan fan and you want to, however you want to frame it and whatever you believe, because by now, with all of the facts and everything that's been written about it, if you're coming back and you believe, like John does, is that Michigan didn't do anything, this was a witch hunt. Somebody said nothing from Michigan. Then, hey, great, do it, because it's all rivalry stuff anyways, and it's all done. So there you go. When it comes down to it, we're talking about Michigan right now, later this afternoon, all night, leading up to the game, and then all day, all night over the weekend, about the maize and blue on the hardwood, on the gridiron, at a baseball stadium. What's going on in recruiting? What's next for Michigan? How the next two games look? How the college football playoff picture looks? All of it. And where is that going on? At the Maize and Blue Review. Go to on3.com/rivals. Get instant access today by joining up. I would love to see you over there. I want to give you a reminder. We do have a basketball coming up tonight. Michigan on the road. It is a late game. They are in Texas at TCU. 9 o'clock tip-off, ESPN2 for your TV. And after the game, we have the Michigan basketball post-game live show for you. Yours truly will be here on this very feed that you're watching or listening to right now. We are live on YouTube after the game. Sometimes takes 1 minute to fire it up, but generally before 5 minutes, it's we're on and we're talking about what happened, and you can join in. So that's a lot of fun. And then a reminder, if you're somebody that's not staying up till 11 o'clock midnight, you wake up early tomorrow and you're thinking about Michigan football and you're going for get some work done or whatever else, you get that podcast going and you say, hey, what did the Maize and Blue Review think of the basketball game last night? And you have it right there for yourself. That is that's great for you. That's why we do it, partly. So you can have that companion for you. Certainly if you miss a game, it ends up coming out for you that way. Let's take some more on the feedback. And it's Ferris, who, speaking of the Maize and Blue Review, someone on the Maize and Blue Review said, I like this Ferris guy. Now, Ferris was talking about coney dogs and pizza. You start talking food, you get people interested, but somebody wanted to know, what about this Ferris guy? And here is Ferris. He is talking about the wise poet of our time. Haters gonna hate, shake it off. Shake it off. As the wise poet Taylor Swift would say, haters are going to hate. Shake it off. Now, this is a very interesting question. Can Michigan go blue? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is Yaxel injured or was it an off game? I tend to think it was the second part, that it was just an off game. However, what we do know is that the 8 days prior, when they played against Oakland, that he had a wrap on his right hand and that he did not start that game. They didn't say if he had cut his hand or it was a thumb injury. But what you did notice that during the broadcast, he did shoot a few. He did come down on the break and threw down a dunk, but he didn't grab onto it. And when he was down low in that opener, he was using his left hand a lot more. And sometimes he would shake and he would grip his right hand. So if he wasn't ready to go 8 days after that, could it have been the hand? Possibly. Now, I would think if I'm Dusty May and I've got this kind of team, they knew that they could win and beat Oakland without Yaxel. whatever that hand injury, playing him, if it was all going to hamper him being 100% by the next time that they were going to play against Wake, I wouldn't have played him at all. So I have to believe that they were thinking that way. Discretion, the better part of valor. Resting him up when you don't need him because you got the long haul, playing it safe. I don't know how much more I can emphasize that. So I think that his hand, but you know how injuries go. Sometimes you have your injury and then so you don't do a lot of things in your favor. Then you come back and it does take a little bit, to come back. So it could be more of a mental thing with his hand. Then during the game, someone, a great Michigan basketball fan, had posted over on the Maize and Blue Review that Yaks had back spasms. And, I didn't see that report anywhere. I was watching the game. I didn't hear them say anything about that. So I asked him about it. He said, no, he was putting definitely a wrap on his back. Well, I've seen a million basketball games, and I also see the player sat down by the bench, and they have every kind of wrap, heat, cold, vibration things. They got it all going on down there at all kinds of times. So maybe that was something, but I didn't think necessarily it meant that he had back spasms. Sometimes it's preventative. Some guys just like to keep their back warm. All kinds of things. So I thought maybe that he was reading into it too much. But then I asked if there was anybody else that had to, that anybody else that saw that, or did anybody else report that? And then somebody came back and said, no, they mentioned it on the broadcast. Now that completely, I thought that I was watching every single second and listening to the broadcast, and I would have thought that if they would have mentioned that Yaks, this potentially back spasms, that would have definitely caught my ear, but it didn't. I apologize for that, and I would think that somebody that said that they heard it on the broadcast would be telling the truth. So that's where I'm at. That is a report, but this is a Michigan fan saying that they said that there was something with his back. Now, look, I don't know exactly what they said and all those kind of things. So potentially an issue with his back, and then the hand, maybe mental, maybe physical. Like I said, or just an off game. Ferris says, how about George Jewett? First African-American football player for both Michigan and Northwestern, 1890s. He became a doctor. Well, you have put all of the information down there that I knew about George Jewett, and that's why they have the trophy. So good job on that, Ferris. Are they going to be able to fit the whole 120-yard, 360 feet in that tiny Wrigley Field? Yeah, I saw a picture of it, and I don't know if it was the real photo, but it's backed up to the bleachers, and then it, so it's center field, and then it runs the rest, and I don't think that they're going to be like you would see back in the day when some pro teams would play in a baseball stadium where, you'd have to be running through the infield. I think it's a field turf that they have put down. They're not going to be playing on the Wrigley grass and then the Wrigley infield, which would cause, for some concern. You've never been in there, and then it's weird. Those of you that are old enough will, remember that. So it wasn't quite so odd, but it'd be odd tomorrow if you saw it and the lines were going through the infield. The wind would be something. It is the Windy City. So there you go. Never know whether to do an ice pack or heating pad. Confusing. I always thought, Ferris, that if it's something that, let's say, you would injure during a game, say you would turn your ankle, immediately for the first 24 or 48 hours, and then, of course, immediately you would want to ice it. After that is then when you would want to bring the heat in play. But that's just what I know, or what I think I know. Sometimes, a little heat, little ice. I used to always see the Pistons had this for years. The media would sit right behind when they were at the Palace, right behind the bench. Pretty sweet seats, except when they would stand up. But they were sweet seats. You're, right on the floor, right behind the bench. Pretty cool. But you would also be, they had this little machine that inside, they had these wraps, the steam wraps, man. They were hot. I would just say they were hot towels, but they were more than that. I mean, they were really hot. But that was the thing, you'd sit behind the bench, and there would be some guys that liked, they got pretty nice cushiony seats to begin with, but then some other guys would like to sit on like these other additional cushions that would raise them up by 6 inches. There would be other guys that always were working on, they've got these, they look like hair dryers. They got the gun, the massage guns. They're always working those, or they got somebody else working something on their side. Oh, he's getting something wrapped. Oh, he's got something going on. I mean, it's that part is confusing. Michigan Go Blue 1234 is saying he hopes Burnett knocks down some shots tonight. Yeah, Burnett wasn't very good in the opener. What I thought was interesting, I was looking at the Michigan press notes today. They put, the clever little headlines like Mara and Morez, the monsters of the Midwest, which, I like that one. But then I also like this one, and they were talking about Namari Burnett and Yaxel because they're in their sixth season. And it says, the headline is The Unks. Burnett and Yaxel have begun their 6 seasons. Burnett began his career at Texas Tech, 2 years at Bama, and now in his 3rd year with the Wolverines. Lindeborg played 3 seasons at Arizona Western College. Never heard of that. Before going to UAB. And then now at Michigan. So the Unks. Ye old reliables. That also puts Burnett in there because he has appeared in 70 consecutive contests. Ye old reliable. Also, Elliot Cadeau, who has appeared in 76 straight, 70 starts. Ye old reliable. I would also put him in the Unk category. Will Cheddar. Not that he's been for 6 seasons, but he has been for 5, all with one team. Cheddar has suited up for 70 of Michigan's last 71, missing only 1 at Northwestern last year due to illness. There they go. McCulley playing tomorrow. I am going to say yes, Donovan McCulley is playing. When asked on Monday about McCulley, who else was McCulley and someone else, he said, no, they're good to go. So McCulley is at least in since Monday. Sharon said he was going to be good to go. Oh, Marlon Klein. Marlon and McCulley are good to go. I also think that Rolder, they put a picture of Rolder out because Rolder comes from Illinois. He was a huge baseball fan, big time baseball player. He loves the Cubs. He's going to be fighting like hell to get out there and practice to see if he can get some snaps to play on the field. I'm not going to be surprised if Rolder plays. Also, I think Cole Sullivan, I'm just going on what Sharon had to say. I don't know what good it does for Sharon to be playing some game if Cole Sullivan wasn't going to be available for the rest of the year or wasn't going to be available for a couple of weeks. But he made it sound like he was the first guy and that he said he felt good about him. Now, look, he might just feel good about his, you could say, well, I felt good about his rehab, but it made it sound like he felt good about him playing this week. So I'm not going to be surprised to see Sullivan, Rolder. I don't know if they're going to start. And then, Klein and McCulley, good to go. Doug, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, they did last year. Yes, they did what? Smash says Costco is now selling a full one-person sauna in a box the size of a recliner. Crazy stuff. Well, Smash, you happen to be talking with someone who is a sauna enthusiast. And I saw those one-person saunas. They actually look pretty decent. They're wood. I have seen a lot of other one-person saunas where you basically put like a raincoat up to your neck, and then you've got this, you got everything underneath, and then the heat was there. I didn't know about that one. They all, in the end, I didn't get any home sauna. I researched some of them. Some of the ones that I wanted were like $5-6 grand. Okay, I'm not gonna go for that one. But as it just went down, the place I go to has an infrared sauna, and the latest data, the literature, these experts, health wellness experts, they can't say enough about. I liked it before. I felt good. Going that sauna for around 20 minutes, felt pretty good when I got out. But that, I didn't know I didn't think it was hurting me. But then, the more you read about it, the more they're like, yeah, they are good for you, and a number of different things. So I still haven't seen, some, and I'm not, it's not a 100%. I mean, maybe it's anecdotal from the different, whoever, is writing about them. Cause I also saw this huge paper that said, oh, this is a claim, this is a claim, this is a claim. And they didn't have it, nailed down where they were saying it. So it just could be a lot of word of mouth. Like I said, anecdotal, but I feel good. And I haven't seen anybody say, oh, it's really bad for you or it's bad at all for you. So I do it and I like it. The only tip that I don't like that this one doctor, said, 19 minutes is the right time to go in there. And then she said, don't drink while you're in there. And I was like, ooh, because I'd like to get in a nice cold bottle of water while I was sitting in there and draining that while I was in the sauna. But she said, no, it's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put your body under this duress, and so it's fighting and sweating and whatever it's going to do. And then, afterwards, before or afterwards, go ahead and hydrate, your can off, but not during. So that was a little bit of a disappointment when I read that, but guess what? I don't drink during my 20 minutes while I'm in there. I don't bring my phone in. I just sit there and meditate. Try to meditate. It's a little more difficult meditating in the sauna. You're sweating. There's people coming in and out. There's other noises that go on that, really, really stresses your focus. But it can be done. And what else are you going to do for 20 minutes if you don't have your phone? Sure enough, the watch comes in handy. And everything you can, possibly do there. Wrigley. They played there last year. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thank you. Ferris. Speaking of UCLA, I think the Rose Bowl game may move to SoFi with UCLA after the Olympics are over. An end of an era. Yeah, I saw that UCLA was talking about going over to SoFi. I can't see it. I can't see it. It's just with the surrounding area. I get it for UCLA because they don't sell it out and it doesn't mean anything to the fans. But fans that come from everywhere else except Pasadena or LA, I guess SoCal, everyone else, they're making a pilgrimage where you get down in that canyon, you got these mountains and you got those mountains, and you've just it's more than half. I mean, the stadium's nothing, the field, it's nothing, but it's everything else around that for the fans. Oh, so I would think that no, that is actually not going to happen, but I haven't looked too much into that. Ferris, I'll take a couple more on the feedback if you got anything. Ferris is calling me a Renaissance man. Curtis Blow or personal saunas. It would be hard to have that stadium being used one time a year. It feels like 1989 Michigan Stadium in there. So if UCLA doesn't use it, so then you would just have it for one time. Can you, if so, no UCLA, can you have concerts? Could you have other teams? Not USC, but is there anyone else that would want to play in that iconic venue? Could you get a few more? I mean, is that going to ruin my college football, my fandom if they are they just going to blow up the Rose Bowl after next year? That's it. We're just going to implode the Rose Bowl. And you're just we're going to make it a parking lot. We'll make it what is it, a golf course down there? Let's make it a driving range where the old Rose Bowl once was. And then in 10 years or so, you want to take our kids down there, maybe your grandkids or whatever, you say, hey, this was the place they used to play the Rose Bowl. I don't know. Maybe. They cut from a different cloth is jumping in. He's saying, no, they're updating the Rose Bowl for the Olympics. What about after the Olympics? I really hope Yaxel is not sitting in the corner all game tonight. LOL. Yeah, look, I know there was some discussion. Well, Yax wanted to play 3, and so him and Dusty had a conversation when he was coming in, saying, "We'll play you at the 3." What I saw is so like a deal. They wouldn't want to play. You might say he's better at 4, but let's be honest. And how basketball works today, I get having those conversations. They're fun. You're talking about lineups and things, but Yax could play the 5. And he's kind of a positionless guy. He can play the 5, and he can also, like Danny Wolf last year, he can play the point. So to me, it really doesn't matter if he's at the 3 or if he's at the 4 or if he's at the 5, because he can play all 3 of those front court spots, and he can operate in the back court. So that really doesn't matter. Now, Morris Johnson Jr. is more of a frontline guy. I know he'll throw up a 3 here or there, and obviously Mara is a pivot guy. But if you're going to have those 3 guys out there at the same time, yeah, Yax is going to be the 3. You don't have to put him in the short corner. He can do some other things. And the first time I saw him play for Michigan in that uniform was that home game against Cincinnati. And I thought, his 3-point shot looks a little mechanical, and, he didn't do a whole lot, but then he really came out and played great. And it was really assertive. And so he was streaky in that first game. And then it wasn't like that against St. John's. He had 3 situations in a row where they had put him in the post and they threw the ball down to him. He scored and got fouled and had an and one on 3 consecutive possessions. I would not be down, and I'm not saying anybody here is. There are some people who are like, oh, Yax, he's not it. Well, he had the hand wrap, and then we don't know what was up with his last game. It is the most intriguing aspect of the Michigan team right now. Is heading into the season, he was the headliner, and we thought that he was. If there was going to be a player that was going to be all Big Ten, if there was going to be a player that could be the player of the year, it was going to be Yaks. I mean, Yaks, the player of the year for Michigan. And, the surprise is that he has not been that player in the first two games. Mara has been was their best player clearly last game. So let's see how this plays out tonight and what's going on. All right. CFADC. He says, do you know what's funny? Locked on UCLA was complaining about Mara leaving UCLA and looking so good playing at Michigan. The host was complaining about how they messed up by letting Mara go. Well, he had shown, I didn't know this myself, but it was Benetti, Jason Benetti, the Tigers TV announcer who was doing the game on Tuesday night. He said, he was really playing well for that last month or a month or so in the new year out in UCLA. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was playing really well or whatever else. But I do know that if I was a UCLA fan or if I was a UCLA fan hosting Locked On UCLA, I could see lamenting about losing a guy who has a damn near 7'7" wingspan and is pretty mobile and can alter the course of any shot within 10 feet of the basket. I mean, that would, to me, that would be a little bit disappointing for sure. I like it now. It's a recent phenomenon when people from other teams say, yeah, Michigan's just throwing a bag at him, or, oh yeah, he's just, Michigan's just paying him. So it's funny because the previous 50 years, that's what Michigan fans would say when they would lose out on it. And now everybody's saying, not everyone, but you say it about Michigan and, I'm all right with it. I mean, it's legal now. Before, when it wasn't, it was like, yeah, well, maybe they should be paying everyone. Maybe they should be paying players. And now that they can, it's different. It's nice, actually. I got to tell you, it made me think, since Dusty took over, when Juwan in his last year, they had Caleb Love, he committed Terrence Williams Jr., who ended up going to Illinois. I mean, these are two really good players. Like Michigan had them. And then they didn't. And it was transcripts and transfer in and the transfer, Michigan's not going to be able to get anybody in. They just can't, in this day and age, get someone in with their transfer rules. They're working behind the 8 ball. And then it was the same thing money-wise. Like, they don't have any NIL. The Dusty's just coming here. I don't hear anybody saying anything about NIL. I don't hear anybody saying anything about the transfer rules. It's just Michigan's getting guys left and right. Maybe as Dusty was coming in, he said, look, these are the things that are going to have to happen, or, I'm not coming in. And then maybe in that first year, when the Indiana job opened up and he got a little bump for himself and then his coaches, and then maybe he said, well, you need some more NIL too. It's interesting. It's a new roster. This is cut from a different cloth. It's a new roster just put together, and they're figuring it out totally different in a real live game as opposed to practicing against each other. They'll be fine in due time. Yeah, they have to gel. There's no doubt. I don't. They're 2-0. And yeah, they had a spurt. So the thing is, though, that with this team is that they're also, this is what comes with the territory. When you put together a roster, you get the number one player in the transfer portal in Yaks. And the thought was, is that this was guy's going to be a National Player of the Year candidate, and he hasn't been that way. So, yeah, you're going to say, well, every little anything. Hey, he was lifting up his shirt, putting some kind of what looked like a heating pad on there. Well, okay, well, that's big news. He had his hand wrapped. He hasn't been anywhere close to, the National Player of the Year in the first 2 games. That's going to be talked about. Every lineup, every timeout. That's what, when you're a big-time team, hey, they need to force more turnovers. They need to do a better job shooting threes. True. They need to cut down on the turnovers. You're putting this team, and eventually you're saying this is a team that should be making a run at the Final Four. So along the way, you're going to nitpick these guys in every single thing that they do. It comes with the territory. I'm going to go overboard too much. A little bit like that with football. And a lot like that with Bryce Underwood. If Bryce Underwood was, forced into playing, and he wasn't all that big of a, big-time recruit, and he wasn't from Michigan, you'd still have great and high expectations and wonder about all these other things, but it's actually not that at all. He's supposed to be the greatest thing ever. And so when he doesn't look like the greatest thing ever, even when you know very well that he's 18 and that it's a process and there's going to be some ups and downs, you can still look at it and say, hey, this is Superman, Batman. I mean, that's it. Do it with a grain of salt. Have some fun with it. That's what we're doing here. I will see you after the game tonight. Come hang out with us, talk some basketball after you watch the game, or listen to it tomorrow. Thanks so much for contributing, watching, listening to this one. And what a weekend. I mean, if you like Michigan, football, basketball, let's go. Hockey. It's all there for you. Take care. Talk with you tonight after the basketball game and tomorrow after the football game. How about that? Bye.
Your legacy. And what will your legacy be, do you think? A couple Heisman's and at least one native.